Hi, this is Jennifer from Healing Relations PR. The meaning of September means pure in spirit, and it's usually around this time of the year when most denominations celebrate the works carried out on the cross. Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish holy day for shouting and blasting, occurs in autumn. There is also the festival for mind, body and well-being. And if you live near the countryside, look out for the torchlight procession. Hi, this is Jennifer Valentine-Miller on the Jennifer Valentine-Miller Show, bringing you another edition of a show with a Christian theme, music that is good for the soul, and perhaps maybe the occasional cake recipe. So in August, our exam results for our young people transpired. So one way or the other, they're going to be university and college spaces being taken up. And students probably might return back to school to better in their exams as sixth form students. Or on the other hand, some might decide to take on board an apprenticeship program with either a small or large organisation, and that's even during COVID-19. They're doing so in order to gain a license to practice and to complete their apprenticeship so that they can reach the end of which begins their journey. Now you know that I'm going to talk about characters in the Bible who were apprenticeships. And two that spring to mind is, firstly, Timothy. And then later on, I will be talking about St. John. Now in 2 Timothy 3:10-17 it says, "Now you followed my teaching, conduct, purpose, faith, patience, love, perseverance, persecutions, and sufferings, such as happened to me at Antioch, at Iconium, and at Lystra. What persecutions I endured, and out of them all the Lord rescued me. Indeed, all who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will be persecuted." Now Timothy was a native of Lystra in Lycaonia, and when St. Paul and Barnabas first visited Lystra, Paul healed a person crippled from birth, leading many of the inhabitants to accept his teaching. When he returned a few years later with Silas, Timothy was already a respected member of the Christian congregation, as were his grandmother Loise and his mother Eunice, who were both Jews. In 2 Timothy 1:5, his mother and grandmother are noted as eminent for their piety and faith. Timothy is said to have been acquainted with the scriptures since childhood. And in 1 Corinthians 16:10, there is a suggestion that he was by nature reserved and timid. When Timothy comes to see that you put him at ease among you, for he's doing the work of the Lord. Now Timothy's father was a Greek Gentile. Thus Timothy had not been circumcised. And Paul now ensured that this was done, according to Acts 16:1-3. This to ensure Timothy's acceptability to the Jews whom they would be evangelizing to. Timothy became St. Paul's disciple, and later his constant companion and co-worker in preaching. In the year 52 AD, Paul and Silas took Timothy along with them on their journey to Macedonia. Augustine extols his zeal and disinterestedness in immediately forsaking his country, his house and his parents to follow the apostle, to share in his poverty and sufferings. Timothy may have been subjected to ill health or frequent ailments, and Paul encouraged him to use a little wine for his stomach's sake. And when Paul went on to Athens, Silas and Timothy stayed to some time at Beroea and Thessalonica before joining Paul at Corinth. Timothy next appears in Acts during Paul's stay in Ephesus, and in later 56 AD or early 57 AD, St. Paul sent him forth to Macedonia with the aim that he would eventually arrive at Corinth. Now, Timothy arrived at Corinth just after Paul's letter, which is written in the 1 Corinthians. Timothy was with Paul in Corinth during the winter time when Paul dispatched his letter to the Romans. According to Acts 23-6, Timothy was with Paul in Macedonia just before the Passover in 58 AD. He left the city before Paul, going ahead of him to await Paul in Troas. This is the last mention of Timothy in Acts. In the year 64 AD, Paul left Timothy at Ephesus to govern that church. His relationship with Paul was close, and Paul entrusted Timothy with missions to great importance. Timothy's name appears as a co-author on Corinthians, Philippians, Colossians, Thessalonians 1 and 2, and Philemon. Paul wrote to the Philippians about Timothy, "I have no one like him." When Paul was in prison and waiting martyrdom, he summoned his faithful friend Timothy for a last farewell. That Timothy was jailed at least once during the period of the writing of the New Testament, and it is implied by the writer of Hebrews mentioning Timothy's release at the end of the epistle. Although not stated in the Bible, other sources have records of the apostle's death. In the mythical Acts of Timothy, documents that were registered in year 97 AD, the 80-year-old bishop tried to halt a procession in honour of the goddess Diana by preaching the gospel. The angry pagans beat the apostle Timothy, dragged him through the streets, and stoned him to death. Okay, so up next, I will have part 2 of crime and our young people, and also a presentation about why our children should go to school, ? Okay, thank you for listening. You're listening to the Jennifer Valentine-Miller Show, containing a selection of my chosen media items. If you would like to interact, please visit me at www.healingrelationstv.co.uk, where you'll find my social media platforms, or send me an email at contact@healingrelationstv.co.uk.
Hello, today I'm making this quick and easy coconut tray bake. The following recipe gives you the option of using regular flour, or if like me and you are gluten intolerant, there is also a gluten-free option. I work in grams, so as always I will put a link in the description box below to some weight conversion websites for cups and ounces. You will need 200 grams of self-raising flour, 200 grams of softened butter, 200 grams of sugar, 4 large eggs, 50 to 100 grams of desiccated coconut, and strawberry or raspberry jam. In a large mixing bowl, beat the butter. Then mix in the sugar. Thoroughly whisk in the eggs. Then add the flour and coconut. At this point you can add between 50 and 100 grams of coconut, depending on how strong you want the flavour to be. Give the mixture one last stir with a spatula to mix in any bits around the edges and base. In a 9x9 square cake tin, pour in and spread out the cake mixture. Bake in an 180 degrees Celsius preheated oven for 35 to 40 minutes, or until a toothpick comes out clean. This may seem like a lot longer baking than I normally do, but square and rectangular cakes take a bit more time to cook. Once ready, turn the cake out upside down to cool on some baking paper to help flatten out the dome shape formed when baking. Alternatively, for a really nice even finish, you can leave the cake to cool in its tin and slice the dome off afterwards. Again, for a better finish, once cooled you can trim off the sides of the cake before spreading on your jam. Today I left them on as I was only making this for myself and kids. Next, sprinkle on the coconut. For extra flavour and texture, you could toast the coconut first if you wanted. Once covered enough, using clean hands gently pat down the coconut to make it properly stick to the jam. Then, keep alternating between sprinkling and patting down the coconut until you feel you have covered it enough. Finally, you can slice up your cake into however many pieces you like. To make equal sizes, I started by cutting through the middle of the cake and worked my way out. To store the cakes, place in an airtight container and consume within a few days for freshness. Thanks for watching.
What is school for? Feel free to call me slow, but I spent 16 years going to school, and I still don't know. When I finished, I didn't know how to do my own taxes, purchase a home, or apply for a loan. I didn't know a thing about investments, building credit, or getting a job. I graduated at the top of my class, and what did I have? This fancy diploma to sit at home with my mom. But luckily, they did teach me some important skills like factoring trinomials and how mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. I'm so happy I remember the Pythagorean theorem, because it helped me a lot. Okay, I'm lying. Let me stop. Because all the stuff they taught me, truthfully, I forgot. Mom, remember when you would ask me, what did you learn in school today? And I would say, nothing much. I wasn't being modest. The truth about it, Mom, is I had already forgotten. And it's not just me. Millions of students sing the same song. How many of you guys avoid eye contact with the teacher to try not to get caught upon? Afraid to raise your hand for fear of being wrong, which proves that school isn't an environment for learning or building up the intellect. It's just a game you play for grades and how many A's you can collect. But I guess what do you expect when the most commonly asked question in class is this gonna be on the test? Is this gonna be on the test? See, if school put learning instead of testing and memorizing as the top standard, then the letter F would not stand for failure. It would stand for find another answer. And if school was really interested in our personal and academic success, students would wake up later, have more freedom, and homework a lot less. And that's not my opinion. This conclusion has been scientifically tested and proven. And any teacher that doesn't believe me, feel free to check my works cited page to inspect. Oh, and I did it in MLA format because I know that's all you will accept. See, students would get more benefit from an extra hour of sleep than putting them through the torture of an extra essay, reading 150 pages, doing problems 1 through 60 on the worksheet, and having 3 projects due by the end of the week. Not only is it pointless pain, but it's also dim-witted. Because we get so much work, but they don't teach the time management skills to deal with it. See, in school, we are controlled by bells. We have to learn in rooms with the feng shui of a prison cell. We have to ask permission to relieve bodily functions, but not before the teacher asks a million questions like, why didn't you go before class? I'm sorry, my bladder is kind of on its own schedule and it's not always timely. See, teachers always say, use your time wisely. But that never made sense to me. Because these 6 cruel hours of our lives we call school might literally be the worst use of time management ever in history. Think about it. The traditional teaching method is foolish. No, it's useless, multiplied by the square root of stupid. What they do is they cram information in your head, force feeding you, and then you throw it up on the test. That's not education. That's bulimia. And the more bulimic you are, the better you will do on their assessments. So it's no wonder why so many students graduate mentally and emotionally anorexic. See, school teaches you how to memorize dots. True education should teach you how to connect them. True education teaches you how to catch a fish. School teaches you, yeah, you caught the fish, but you didn't show your work, so it doesn't count. Throw it back. I'm just asking, what is school for? It's not education. That's just not true. If you still think that, you might be sniffing glue. See, the word education comes from the Latin root educe, meaning bring out, i.e. bring the gifts out of a person and make them viable. But school doesn't bring out much. It just stuffs more facts inside of you. Now, some of that stuff is justifiable. We need reading, writing, and some arithmetic. That's fair. But are you telling me metamorphic and igneous rocks are more important than self-care? If suicide is the third leading cause of death of ages 10 to 24, and Harvard studies suggest the biggest predictor for success is self-control and emotional health, then why the heck aren't we taught how to handle stress, bullies, or rejection? How about anxiety or depression? You know, skills we need for our entire lives. Bro, I don't even know how to cook. I'm honestly surprised I'm still alive. But hey, at least I can name all the battles that happened in the Civil War. Seriously, what is school for? Some say you need it to be successful, and that's something we do not doubt. But do you own a MacBook or iPhone? Did you know they both were created by a dropout? Are you watching this video on Facebook or YouTube? Doesn't matter which you choose, they both were created by dropouts. Ever use Snapchat, WhatsApp, shopped at Whole Foods? Well, thank a dropout. Does your home furniture come from IKEA? Okay, don't get the wrong idea. He was not a dropout. Don't be a fool. I mean, how could he drop out? Ingvar Kamprad, founder of IKEA, never even went to school. I know what you're thinking. He's just picking and choosing. There's millions who didn't go to school that aren't successful. Who is he fooling? And you're right. But open your history books and start perusing. You'll find the very people we idolize in school never really had formal and/or secondary schooling. I'm talking George Washington, Abe Lincoln. America's best presidents had zero school between them. Ben Franklin, Thomas Edison, shall I proceed? Ernest Hemingway, Mark Twain, Teddy Roosevelt, Margaret Mead. Now please, I'm not saying drop out, because some schools are great and many teachers are rare treasures. I'm saying that there's a difference between people who are smart and people who score better. I'm saying that your future is something that no test will ever measure. Even if that test begins in 3 letters like SAT, ACT, it's BS if they say those determine your LIFE. No, your destiny is in your hands. You must shape it to be great. So don't expect school to open doors, because it's more likely to slam them in your face. Sometimes I wonder about all the dreams lost in school and how much potential goes to waste. If it wasn't for music and YouTube, then I would have been just another lost case. Everybody watching this, please, close your eyes.
Teenagers are being sent by their parents to East Africa to avoid knife crime in the UK. Why are they taking that drastic choice? In the few years, one young man was doing his A-levels, and he found it very tough indeed. And he was seeing people being dropped from school every other day by being stabbed. His family came to the realization that London's not the place to be for a teenager. The young boy's name, for example, was Yusuf, and he was born and raised in London, but moved to Nairobi after a close friend in his neighbourhood was stabbed to death. It is a decision an increasing number of parents are taking for their children's safety. Of the 100 people stabbed to death in the UK so far this year, 8% were of Somali heritage, according to the RISE project, which works with young British Somalians in North London. Jamal Hassan mentors young men in London, many from Somali families. He explains parents want to protect their child by all means necessary. If it means that the child doesn't finish school, college or university, or he will not have a good job by the time you come from them in the future is not really important. What is important is that child's life. One mother who had sent her child to Africa told him she could now sleep at night because she knew any police sirens she heard was not for her son. As Christians, we turn to the Bible as our guide for living. It has so much to say to us about spiritual things, but also about what's practical. So what does the Bible say about children? The charity World Vision says that children are a part of God's creative plan. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it," in Genesis 1:28. After creating Adam and Eve, God commanded that they be fruitful or have children. The original design included families with children. Children were not an afterthought. Everything about creation was pronounced good, including his design for children. Secondly, children are gifts from God to families. Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring, a reward from him, in Psalms 127:3. The word heritage comes from the root meaning to get or inherit. It is an honour and responsibility to be entrusted with a little one from God. We stand beside him to shepherd their growth and development, to advocate for them, and provide for their needs while they are in our care. Thirdly, children need nurture and guidance. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Proverbs 22:6. When planting vines and some bushes, gardeners will attach them to a framework, like a pole or trellis, to keep them from spreading out of control. Children need solid structure to keep their physical, emotional, social, and spiritual growth on track too. This means we are present in their lives, supporting their growth and development, and leading by godly example. Fourthly, children need discipline. Discipline your children, and they'll give you peace. They'll bring you delight to your desire. Proverbs 29:17. There's no question, disciplining children is hard work. It takes the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, spoken of in Galatians 5:22-23. Parents who really love their children will discipline them, as God does to us. Not harshly, but with the goal of leading them in the ways of the Lord. Done this way, they'll become adults and fulfill all the Creator intends for them to become. And that's in Hebrews 12:7. Fifthly, orphans, displaced and refugee children and children living in poverty need special care. Do not oppress the widow or the fatherless, the foreigner or the poor, in Zechariah 7:10. Children are vulnerable even in good circumstances, but when there's poverty or violence, children can suffer real damage. The Bible singles out orphans for us to help. Those without fathers are close behind orphans. and children living as refugees, strangers, or displaced by conflict, or living in extreme poverty are also vulnerable. There is no social or financial safety net for them, no one to provide for their nurture or need. God asks people to worship Him, to help take care of children in such vulnerable places. The 6th point says, children need protection. Meanwhile, our women and children will live in fortified cities for protection from the inhabitants in the land. And that's Numbers 32:17. We live in a world corrupted by evil. Child labour, physical abuse, child exploitation, and child marriage are only some of the challenges children today may encounter, not to mention things like drug and alcohol addiction, bullying, or gang involvement. God is our deliverer from trouble and enemies, and we should protect children from people who seek their harm as an extension of our love for Him. Some of us are even called further by God to act as advocates or to become professionals in child protection programs and organisations. But whether a professional or not, we can all be aware and help to protect the children in our lives and community. And the 7th point is, children are blessed by God. And He took the children in His arms, placed His arms on them and blessed them. And that's in Mark 10:16. In blessing the children while they're on earth as God incarnate, Jesus shows His heart towards little ones. In verse 13 of the passage of Mark, the disciples rebuked the people for bringing their children to Jesus, probably because He was talking with self-important religious leaders. His response was anger at His followers' ignorance and pettiness. Their actions were unkind and unworthy of disciples. Children are not too unimportant to have God's undivided attention. He always desires to bless them in every way.
Thank you for listening to the Jennifer Valentine-Miller Show on PRZ FM 109.2. Until next time, wishing you a blessed week ahead.